First Summers, Cyclops. Scott Summers was the first of the Summers family tree to appear in the comics. He made his first appearance in the X-Men issue number 1 in 1963. There Scott was introduced to us as a somewhat self-doubting character who would become a leader but still struggle to see himself as worthy of love and deserving of his own happiness. Scott operated as a part of Professor X's X-Men team under the codename of Cyclops, and when Professor X was called away on a secret mission, Cyc would take his place as team leader, often maintaining a position as leader of the X-Men throughout the years, both in a field leader and commander role. Even today, at the time of this recording, Scott is currently the leader of the X-Men in the current 2022 X-Men comics, almost 60 years later. When we first met Scott, we didn't know very much about his family life or childhood, but as we got to know him, we learned more about how he came to be the Professor's golden boy and his first X-Man, and along the way, we'd also learn about his mysterious childhood and family as well. Who exactly are the Summers? At least in regards to Scott's original family tree before he grew up, he had his own family, which is its own tangled web that we'll attempt to unravel later on. Let's start with the easy stuff. Scott's parents are his father, Christopher Summers, and mother, Catherine Ann Summers. Scott was the eldest in his family, but also had a younger brother, Alex. When Scott was young, his parents seemingly perished in a plane accident. Alex and Scott were saved by their parents, who gave them a parachute and got them safely out of the plane. As a result of this near-death experience, Scott would sustain permanent brain injuries that he still suffers from to this day. Scott would not only be plagued by this, but also by nightmares of these events, which he struggled to recall with clarity as a result of the brain damage he suffered that fateful day. We later learned though that Scott's parents didn't die in that exploding plane. Instead, they were actually kidnapped, beamed aboard a Shi'ar spaceship. Christopher Summers was a US Air Force pilot, aiming to become an astronaut, but after being kidnapped by the Shi'ar and escaping them, he became a space pirate, known by the name of Corsair. Christopher escaped his captors the first time almost as soon as he was kidnapped. At least initially that's what we were kinda told, but he was recaptured after he tried to rescue his wife, Catherine, who was and killed by Emperor Deken of the Shi'ar Empire in front of Christopher. Christopher as Corsair would find love again though with Hepzibah. Hepzibah, from an alien skunk-like race known as the Mephitissoids, would be among the group that would band together to escape Shi'ar captivity and become the starfaring group known as the Starjammers, which Corsair is the leader of, becoming like a new sort of family for Corsair. Alex and Scott, having no next of kin, would be taken in by an orphanage. But whose orphanage was it? You may have already guessed. We're talking about a surprise, often unwelcome addition to the Summers family tree, Mr. Sinister. That's right, this is where Mr. Sinister's obsession with the Summers family, chiefly Scott, started, when Alex and Scott were taken into the state home for foundlings in Nebraska, where Mr. Sinister was the head operator. He had his administrator secure the two boys. While Alex was later adopted by Andrew and Joanna Blanding, who would legally become his adoptive parents, Scott was not, and he stayed behind at the state home, where Sinister would often run tests on him in secret, becoming more and more obsessed with Scott and his genetics over time. Eventually, however, Scott would run away, running into Jack Winters, known as the superhuman criminal Jack O'Diamonds, and would later be rescued from Jack with the help of Professor X, who would then recruit Scott into his school for gifted youngsters, and later his mutant team, acting as sort of a father figure to him. Alex, however, wouldn't only receive new foster parents, but also a new foster sister, Haley Blanding, who's also part of our family tree. The Blandings actually adopted Alex to help them heal from the death of their son, Todd Blanding, and in a way, they wanted him to replace the hole that Todd had left in the family, kind of also making him like be the new Todd? Yeah, it's pretty messed up. Unbeknownst to both Alex and Scott, they both had a secret younger sibling. Their sibling wasn't a secret because, you know, their parents had like kept their existence from the two boys, but because Kate actually hadn't known she was pregnant at the time of the flight. As she was killed, the baby in her womb was taken from her and placed by Emperor Deken into an incubator accelerator, which caused the baby to grow quickly into a young man. This mysterious younger brother is the man that is known as the third Summers brother, Gabriel Summers. He would become known more commonly though in the comics as Kid Vulcan and then later just as Vulcan. In fact, for many years in comic book history, readers would be left on a cliffhanger surrounding his existence, as it was first alluded to by Mr. Sinister back in 1993 in the second volume of the X-Men in issue number 23. However, it wouldn't be till 2005's X-Men Deadly Genesis series that we would actually get to meet this third brother and have his true identity revealed to us. There's also the weirdness that in Deadly Genesis it's established that Kate was only days away from having the child. Yet, in the original art where she is shown to have been made to join Emperor Deken's harem and then she's killed, she looks very non-pregnant. There is also the fact that it mentions she was only 2 months pregnant when first abducted, which actually applies that Corsair's initial escape attempt didn't actually happen as soon as maybe we originally thought it did, or it was originally implied, if she was only days away from giving birth, so he would actually have been in captivity then for a few months. Aside from that weirdness, we would also learn that Kate also had several children with Emperor Deken, that is, genetically speaking. Deken had these offspring created with the hopes of expanding the genetic potential of the Shi'ar Empire by introducing different kinds of genetics into it. When he was young, Adam was taken from the lab he was created in by Joneth, who became his adoptive father, hiding Adam's true origins from him. Adam would grow up and later become known as Adam Naramani, or codename Adam X. And originally, as he appeared shortly after Sinister alluded to Scott having multiple brothers, not just Alex, it was believed that he was the one, other than Alex, that Sinister was referring to. Adam X was a half-brother to Alex and Scott, but later Gabriel would be implied to be, that extra brother, although Sinister could have been talking about both or either for all we know, really. Adam is of course both tied to the Shi'ar royal family and to the Summers family tree, as he would later learn. Between the three brothers, each had their very own different life experiences, which would lead them to having different kinds of families. So before we move on, let's go forward and talk about some of their kids. The Summers children and weird relations. I feel like for the Summers brothers families, it is easier for me to go in reverse order from youngest to oldest. So let's start with Vulcan. Vulcan, after being rapidly aged to his prime years, was enslaved by the Shi'ar and sent to Earth to serve the Emperor's envoy there, but instead ended up escaping and was found by Moira McTaggart, who took him in and had him join her own roster of mutants. His story training with Moira is introduced in Deadly Genesis. Vulcan is known for being the most powerful of the Summers children. Vulcan would end up in space after being recruited to a mission to save the original X-Men and kind of failing somewhat. Vulcan would return to the Shi'ar Empire, end up imprisoned, freed, married to Deathbird, and later on would also become Emperor of the Shi'ar Empire. Which, yes, this does mean that the Naramanis would have become his in-laws, including Deken, who killed his mother, imprisoned his father, and enslaved him. Wow, that's a messed up family right there. Which also makes Adam X both Vulcan's half-brother and his nephew. Pretty wild stuff. Deathbird and Vulcan would have a baby together, although we still don't know that child's name, if it's still around somewhere. Deathbird being a mother was even acknowledged as recently as the 4th volume of New Mutants issue number 5 from 2020. And well, that's really all there is to Vulcan thus far. Now let's talk about Alex. Alex would grow up to become the mutant hero and sometimes villain known as Havoc, and it's no wonder he sometimes turns a little evil considering how rough his life was both leading up to joining the X-Men and even after that happened. Alex was given his codename and original costume by Larry Trask after being taken captive by his Sentinels. Alex would attempt to refuse to join the X-Men multiple times, but eventually it kind of just became inevitable. Originally, Sinister believed his power levels to be greater than Scott's. Initially, Mr. Sinister actually suppressed Alex's mutant ability when it first manifested when he was a child. He put psi blockers on him and wiped his memory of the incident that triggered it, as Alex's powers were considered to be too uncontrollable. They would only be triggered again later when he ran into an X-gene copy of himself in mutant-human hybrid, the Living Monolith. Yes, the Living Monolith is here! Amit Abdul, who had been mutated by Apocalypse using Alex's DNA, making him like a genetic brother of sorts who was psychically linked to Alex. Alex would only have one daughter that we know of, surprisingly not with any of his more popular romantic ships, but instead with Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp. They had a daughter in an alternate timeline which has since been wiped from existence. She was pretty adorable and awesome, and her name was Katie, or Catherine Summers. In typical Alex Summers must suffer Marvel fashion, after having half his face melted by Kang, he is the only one left with memories of Katie, so he can't even talk to anyone about it. Janet doesn't even remember being with him or their daughter. I still kinda hope one day that Katie will get to return return via the main timeline somehow. Finally, let's talk about the mad complexity that is Scott Summers' family tree, with Jean Grey, Madeline Pryor, and beyond. Although Scott was always sweet on Jean, she became the Phoenix and later Dark Phoenix, seemingly dying, sacrificing herself to save others once she turned dark. It was after her apparent death that Scott met Madeline Pryor, spelled Madelynepr, probably one of the most commonly misspelled names in all of comics. Madeline happened to look just like Jean. What a coincidence! Scott fell in love with her and left the X-Men to settle down with Maddie. Together, the two had a baby, Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, initially referred to in the comics as Baby Christopher. However, their relationship started to deteriorate when Scott decided to return to the new, old X-Men team, X-Factor, after Jean Grey was revealed to be alive and well, herself joining the team. Jean hadn't died, it turned out, but was simply in a stasis cocoon at the bottom of Jamaica Bay, while the Phoenix adopted her form and personality, appearing as her, later seemingly perishing. But of course, this is the Phoenix Force, so we know that that is not true. And, you know, it gets even weirder than this. The Phoenix Force, along with Mr. Sinister, were later revealed to be like parents to Madeline, who it turned out was a clone of Jean Grey created from a piece of the Phoenix Force. Surprise, surprise! No wonder she looked almost identical to Jean. This revelation, in combination with Scott abandoning her, would drive Madeline mad. Feeling abandoned, she would ally herself with Alex Summers and also take him for her lover. He would become known as her Goblin Prince, and she would become the villain known as the Goblin Queen, aiming to retrieve and later seemingly sacrifice Christopher, who had been taken from her by Mr. Sinister. And it gets somehow even weirder than that. After Maddie was dealt with, Jean would be given memories of raising baby Christopher, so psychically he was like her own child. Baby Christopher would later be taken by Apocalypse, saved by the clan Ascani, cloned, and later grow up across time, becoming a time traveler who we all know as Nathan Summers, or Cable. Nathan's evil clone, who was raised by Apocalypse, now also weirdly, I guess somehow in this family tree, would be known as Strife. Cable would rescue the mutant Messiah, meet a woman named Hope, who he fell in love with and married, and name the adopted baby mutant Messiah Hope Summers, after his wife and her adoptive mother. His daughter Hope had a biological mother before that who died, which we now know was named Louise Spaulding. Before being with Hope Summers though, Cable would be married to Aaliyah Dayspring, his first wife, with whom he had a son known as Tyler Dayspring, aka Genesis. But not Apocalypse's wife Genesis, or Apocalypse's younger clone Genesis, or Apocalypse's alternate universe son Genesis. None of those Geneses. In a weird twist, Aaliyah was also an initiate in the clan Ascani, who originally saved Nathan when he was a baby. The other weird thing about the clan Ascani is Mother Ascani, who saved Nathan as a baby, is also part of the Summers family tree, being a daughter of an alternate reality pairing of Scott Summers and Jean Grey. So Nathan as a baby was actually saved by his alternate reality stepsister, or you know, just sister if you consider Jean to truly also be his mother. Let's rewind back a little bit to after the X-Men beat Madeline Pryor during the events of Inferno. Scott would end up later married following his disastrous relationship with Maddie, of which he is actually a good deal responsible for, to be honest, to Jean Grey, his first love. They would not have children in the main continuity, but as we already know with Mother Ascani, had children together in alternate realities. While I won't mention all of those children here, two important ones in regards to their interactions with the main continuity are Rachel Summers and Nate Grey. Sometimes known as Ascani, or Prestige, or Phoenix, or Marvel Girl, Rachel Summers is from the same reality as Mother Ascani, Earth 811, the Days of Future Past reality. And Mother Ascani is actually not necessarily an alternate version of her, as Rachel was actually split into separate beings across time when she sacrificed herself to save her teammate Captain Britain. Rachel is immensely powerful and previously lived on the blue area of the moon in the Krakoan habitat known as the Summer House. Not residing in the Summer House on the blue area of the moon is Nate, or Nathan Grey. Nathan Grey actually has a psychic link with his alternate reality self Cable, and is like Cable if he wasn't infected with the techno-organic virus, making him kind of like a more perfect being. Nate Grey is actually the genetic offspring of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, and was made by his reality's Mr. Sinister, who there is just known as Sinister, although he was also raised by his reality's Forge, so that's kinda like his foster dad. Nate Grey goes by the codename X-Man, and is basically like a mutant version of Jesus. He hails from the reality of Earth 295, the Age of Apocalypse reality. Who are the Summers family grandparents? When Scott married Madeline Pryor, the two of them became pilots, with Scott moving to Anchorage, Alaska. If you think that sounds random, it actually isn't really at all. Anchorage is actually a place where Scott feels most at home. It's where he grew up before losing his parents and brother and having his life go pretty sideways. His grandparents, Philip and Deborah, were actually both born in Anchorage too. Philip also likely inspired his sons, Christopher's own passion for flight, as Philip himself joined the US Air Force and even served in World War II. Deborah and Philip were also a driving force likely in Madeline and Scott's choice to settle down and become involved in cargo pilotry, or the cargo plane industry. In fact, they were the ones that first introduced Scott to Madeline, who was actually working for them at the time, as they were the owners of the cargo plane business that she worked for. When they first learned that their son and his children had not perished years earlier in a tragic plane explosion but were alive and well, they invited them to visit. But due to it being the busy season, Philip and Deborah sent Madeline to meet and escort their family home to meet them, because they, were too busy to get there to greet them. Eventually, Philip and Deborah would sell their company to Nathaniel Essex. Years later, Philip would also end up meeting Adam X, who would later be revealed as the half Shi'ar, half mutant brother of Scott, Alex, and Gabriel. Philip was losing his eyesight at the time, and he lost control of his plane while flying, crashing, when Adam X happened to be passing nearby and decided to offer aid. Adam X saved Philip's life, but could not save his eyesight, and he would sadly go blind. Paying a visit to Philip in the hospital, he would run into Scott's then wife, Jean Grey, and have her link his mind to Philip's so that he could share with him memories of what Philip had most longed for in his life, to be a pilot in outer space, which Adam X had been during his time working for the Shi'ar. I just love that story. I think it's so sweet. As is typical, like with the late Catherine Summers, mother of Scott, Alex, Gabriel, and Adam X, and wife of Corsair, we do not know much about Deborah's heritage at all. But we do know a few things about Philip's heritage, so let's talk about that. Namely, we know he had an aunt named Gloria Dane, who was the daughter of his grandmother, Amanda Mueller, and likely a man that she hooked up with at some point, who I guess his last name was Dane. The kind of weird thing about this is that although Gloria was Philip's aunt, she's actually most likely younger than him in terms of when she was born. She was born in 1950 while he served in the military in World War II, so figure that out. This can likely be explained by the fact that his grandmother, Gloria's mother, Amanda, was immortal thanks to her mutant power. But we'll talk more about Amanda in a little bit. Gloria Dane went by the alias of Fontanelle and was a mutant with telepathic abilities, specifically good at deciphering and reading people's dreams. Originally, Fontanelle appeared as someone hired to figure out Gambit's involvement with the mutant massacre. However, after her contract to do so was terminated, she instead changed sides and decided to help Gambit uncover the mystery behind the person who had hired her new son, who turned out to be an alternate version of Gambit himself, actually, and help him to also figure out the mysterious woman known as Black Womb, who turned out to be Gloria's own mother, Amanda Mueller. This is probably a good as time as any to discuss the rumored connection of Gambit to the Summers family, and answer the question, is Gambit a Summers? Although at the time of this recording, to kind of answer that question, all it really remains, at least in the main continuity, is a rumor. After Mr. Sinister teased about a third Summers brother, there was much speculation as to who this could be. Initially, Fabian and Isaiah worked to leave a trail of breadcrumbs that led to Adam X, who was revealed to be the genetic son of Shi'ar Emperor Deken and Catherine Summers in the comics. Following that, there were hints that it might be Gambit, whose birth parents remain unknown in the comics. To help this rumor sort of gain more momentum, in an alternate future known as Earth 41001, seen in Christopher Claremont's X-Men The End, an alternate version of Gambit is revealed to be the hybrid clone of both Mr. Sinister and Scott Summers, although in my opinion that would actually make him more the genetic offspring of the two characters than Scott's and Alex's brother. It would be more like, Gambit is the son of Sinister and Scott together, which is a weird thought. Gambit, however, has never been established as a clone of either Sinister or Cyclops in the main continuity, or at least he hasn't been yet. A few years later, Vulcan was introduced in Ed Brubaker's X-Men Deadly Genesis, where he was revealed as the third Summers brother, Gabriel, being the son of both Catherine and Christopher Summers. As with much of comic book continuity though, it's good to keep in mind that it's quite fluid, but while it could change at any point, this is the latest in regards to where we are at with the third Summers brother rumor and revelation in the main continuity, with Vulcan being established currently as the answer to that mystery. Back to the mysterious Amanda Mueller though. Who is she, and what or who is Black Womb? Amanda Mueller is Scott's, Alex's, Max's and Gabriel's great-great-grandmother, and has been speculated to be where the Summers X gene potentially originates. Amanda is also the mother of Philip's unnamed father and of Philip's aunt Gloria Dane. As a young woman, she grew up in the 19th century and ended up entering into a deal with Nathaniel Essex after he discovered her mutant genes were very powerful and very formidable. The deal was she would marry and conceive children, but feigned that the pregnancies didn't actually come to term while actually delivering the newborns to Essex so that he might study their genetics. In exchange, it's believed that she was paid handsomely. While we don't know much about Mr. Dane, who was Gloria's father and presumably was at some point married to Amanda, we do know about her previous husband, Daniel Summers. He was the grandfather of Philip Summers, who likely never knew Philip, as he left his wife and son after Amanda was accused of being the Black Womb killer. His son would grow up, likely get married, and have a son of his own, becoming Philip's father. As a mutant, Amanda Mueller's powers involved longevity, rendering her essentially immortal, but not immune to the effects of aging, so her age continued to show and affect her appearance over time. Amanda Mueller would go on to become the leader of the government-run Black Womb Project, of which Kurt Marco, Brian Xavier, and Irene Adler were also a part of, with Kurt Marco and Brian Xavier even involving their own offspring, Kane Marco and Charles Xavier, in their experiments. At one point, Amanda Mueller attempted to steal Mr. Sinister's powers, but she failed, and whether alive or dead, she hasn't really been spotted since then. Philip's estranged grandfather, Daniel Summers, and his father, Oscar, are both interesting mind trips as well. Before Daniel married or even met Amanda Mueller in America, he actually lived in London, in England, and he was known by the name of Danny Edge. Danny's parents were murdered when he was young, and he ended up kidnapped by a group known as the Marauders. Not the current heroic Marauders that we know from the comics though, led by Captain Kate Pryde, but Nathaniel Essex's Mr. Sinister's first ever Marauders group. Essex had people kidnapped so that he might experiment on and keep them underground in secret in the sewers. However, Danny was one of the victims of Essex who was saved from Sinister's mad science by the time-traveling X-Men Cyclops and Phoenix, aka Scott Summers and Jean Grey. Yeah, I know! After being freed, he and a former member of the Marauders by the name of Oscar Stamp fled the UK to start a new life in America. At immigration, Oscar Stamp and Danny Edge claimed to be father and son, and inspired by the heroes who'd freed them both, took the surname of Summers, which means that Oscar was the adoptive, likely estranged great-great-great-grandparent of Scott and his brothers. Paradoxical, and that's pretty much as far back as we can go with the Summers family currently, in terms of ancestry. There are also ancestors on Jean's side of the family, but as I said in my previous explained video, the Greys kinda really deserve their own list because there's a lot of them. If there are other mutants you want to hear us explain the family trees of, let us know in the comments, by the way, because I would love to dive into some more mutant family tree histories for you. The Frosts also have an interesting family tree as well, which could also be relevant in a video like this, as although I didn't focus on it in the previous video, Emma Frost is also known for being a major love interest of Scott's. Although the two were never formally wed, there are many alternate realities where the two of them have children as well. We focused on some of the more prominent Summers children in regards to their ties to the main continuity, but now we're going to dive into some of the more obscure ones as we discuss even more Summers family alternate kids. Speaking of Emma Frost, let's start off with another popular child of Scott's who happens to be the child of both he and Emma in an alternate version of the Days of Future Past reality. That's right, we're talking about Ruby Summers. While the original Days of Future Past reality is known as Earth 811, Ruby hails from the alternate of that alternate designated Earth 1191, the same reality that Lucas Bishop also hails from. Here, Ruby is the daughter of Scott Summers and Emma Frost. In this reality, Ruby was given her name by the time-displaced Layla Miller, a mutant who, unrelated to her mutant powers, also has precognitive abilities granted to her by her future self. Ruby also ends up falling in love with Trevor Fitzroy in this reality. Ruby is one of the mutants who ends up helping return Layla Miller and Multiple Man, aka Jamie Madrox, do their own timeline. And she's just super cool. People love her. She's got a Ruby form. She's pretty awesome. In the Earth 1191 reality, a splintered alternate version of Cable exists, who is half-brother to Ruby. His whole existence is super confusing, but basically this version of Cable is responsible for bringing the mutant Messiah here, whose power caused an extermination level event which led to the Sentinels attacking the mutants. This is the future that Bishop warns us against during the Messiah Complex event, and which he is trying to prevent from happening, but you know, it happens anyways. In the alternate future of X-Men X-Men The End, Cyclops also has multiple children with Emma Frost, including their psionic daughter, Megan Summers, 2 also psionic unnamed twin girls, and a son named Alex. There is also an alternate version of Nathan Summers in this reality, who is the son of Scott and Madeline and goes by the codename Cable again. And Scott and Jean also have a daughter together in this reality named Rachel Summers, who goes by the codename of Marvel Girl. Gambit, who is also connected to the Summers family tree in the X-Men The End reality, also has children with his wife, Rogue. Together, they have 3 children. Their adopted daughter, who takes the name of Anne-Marie for herself and uses the alias No Name, Olivier, or Ollie, who goes by the alias Olivier Raven, and Rebecca Raven LeBeau. And obviously, because, Gambit is kind of tied to the Summers in that reality, this makes sense. Aside from these alternate children, Alex Summers, aka Havoc, also has another child from an alternate reality as well. Like Katie Summers, his son Scotty also hails from an alternate reality. This is a reality that Alex's consciousness was displaced to after being caught in a time machine explosion. Known as Mutant X, in the reality of Earth 1298, the X-Men team are instead known as the Six, and this reality's Alex was actually their leader. Havoc awoke inside his alternate self's body to learn that here, he and his wife Madeline Pryor had a son named Scott Charles Summers. After the birth of their child and the displacement of Alex of Earth 616's consciousness into his alternate self's body, Madeline would end up possessed and would basically become the Goblin Queen in this reality. While their son would save her temporarily, eventually she would revert to the Goblin Queen once more, and it was during Havoc's fight against her that he was sent back through a time rift and basically ended up back in his own body and on his own world in Earth 616. In this reality, Alex also had another genetic daughter in Raven LeBeau. She is the adopted daughter of Belladonna and Gambit, who is genetically created by honorary Summers family member Mr. Sinister, using the combined genes of Alex Summers and Jean Grey. Raven also has a genetic brother created by Mr. Sinister using Summers and Grey DNA, known as Nate Grey, whose origins are similar to that of his Earth 295 AOA counterpart. AOA being Age of Apocalypse. There are many clones who have cropped up over the years in regards to the Summers family tree, but listing all of them would take a while. We covered some of them on the first part of our video explaining the Summers family tree, but I left out a pretty odd one who is also connected to self-inserted family tree member Mr. Sinister as well. Zraven. Zraven is a weird one. He is a genetically created offspring who is technically related to both Scott and Jean, and also related kinda to Mr. Sinister and a bunch of other people as well. Mr. Sinister created Zraven in the main continuity of Earth 616, combining together the DNA of the original X-Men team, the original Kraven the Hunter, and the Carnage symbiote, with Sinister being Zraven's creator. Sinister attempted to use Zraven to acquire more samples of mutant DNA, but ultimately Zraven would rebel against him after learning from Cyclops the truth about, how Sinister treats his favored creations and experiments. Zraven dodged a bullet there, really. While there are likely more clones and alternate reality children I could focus on for this video, I'd like to take a moment to also acknowledge one more grandchild that I left out on part 1. We talked about Hope Summers and Tyler Dayspring there, but now we're talking about the alternate reality grandson of the alternate reality Jean and Scott from Earth 967. Hyperstorm is the son of Rachel Summers and Franklin Richards. A pretty weird combination if I do say so myself. Jonathan Richards hails from the alternate reality of Earth 967, which is yet another alternate take on the alternate reality of Earth 811, Days of Future Past. Here, Scott and Jean have another daughter named Rachel Summers, and she ends up falling in love with and marrying the son of Sue Storm and Reed Richards, Franklin. As such, Hyperstorm is known for being extremely powerful, wielding a force known as the Supreme Force, which in essence allows him to tap into the infinite psionic power of hyperspace to accomplish many impressive feats. Jonathan is also known for his beyond genius intellect.